now I'm actually working for an environmental consulting firm, which is the exact opposite. I'm collecting data right now for a solar facility project in California, and they really rely on this data to make decisions about keeping the facility running and stuff. And so they place a high value on our field work. And I went from volunteering to making $18 an hour with a whole bunch of overtime. And so it really does range, and it depends what side of the field you're in. Research biology, especially with animals, sometimes you can feel like you're getting a little underrated, and it can be hard to deal with funding levels. But if you really enjoy it, then that's really what makes it. On the other hand, there are a lot of opportunities to do environmental consulting, and in the private sector, and it's actually quite lucrative. And in fact, I know a bunch of people who work in consulting firms for like 4 months or 6 months out of the year, and then they just take off the rest of the year and go travel and have fun. Especially when a lot of times, like for instance, right now my housing's being covered, and so I don't have to pay rent. And when you work really hard outdoors all day, you don't feel like you have to do it anymore. Go out. You're too tired to go out and spend money anywhere else, so you end up saving a lot of money. So it's really up to you how much money you make and where your interests lie. And I think as much as I'm enjoying getting paid pretty well by the private sector, I think my passion really lies with more basic science and research on animals and animal behavior. And so probably be taking a little pay cut when I go back to that sector, to the public sector. But it's what I want to do, and you should always follow your passions.
Okay, Mike, thank you. You can sign off now if you'd like. Thanks for your help.
All right. I hope that was informational, and good luck, everyone. I hope you find what you want to do.
Okay, thanks, Mike.
Bye.
Okay. If anyone else, though, has any questions, not about field biology, we are happy to. Yeah,
more research based. I have a little experience way back when I was doing my first degree in the research lab, and I just remember being very paranoid that I was going to ruin this poor graduate student's work. And I feel like they probably wouldn't assign me anything too drastic, but I was really hesitant in getting in there and asking questions. So is there an appropriate way in which you would go about that? Are there any suggestions of really getting more involved in research experience without ruining your life story?
I wouldn't worry too much about ruining anybody's experiment. I think, graduate students love students that are interested in what they're doing. So the more questions you ask, the better. I think there's really no upper limit. I think you shouldn't be hesitant. You've got to, the more you learn about what's going on around you in the lab, ask, even if it's not your project, somebody else's project. Talk to people,
Yeah. Ask lots of questions.
That's the whole point of you being there.
Occasionally buy pastries, I think.
Okay.
Right. You can bribe, that's totally acceptable.
And I think you should also know that when a lab takes on an undergraduate research assistant, they understand that that is an investment in time, that they have to train that student, and that especially at the beginning, that's not a time-saving thing to take on an undergraduate. It's an investment on the part of the lab in teaching and training someone. So no one expects you to come in and instantly be contributing and pushing ahead the progress of the lab more so than if you hadn't been there. So that is not something you should worry about when you first start. You should worry about asking lots of questions and learning what you can, so that eventually you can contribute and save time and produce good work for the lab.
It's really important to know we were all at that stage once in our career, so we really understand deeply how it feels to be a deeply confused undergraduate working in a lab. reason we have undergrads working in our labs and we agree to take on a lot of undergrads is not because we're hoping to get a lot of productivity out of you. We're doing it because we were once you, and we want to give back. And it's like very rare that any undergraduate really contributes very much towards the research progress. That's not the point. It's all about trying to train the next generation of people, and we want people who, and for that reason, we want people who are enthusiastic about what they're doing. We want to train people who really care about it, who are passionate about it. So showing that you care about it, that you're passionate about it, and if you're willing to work hard, even if you don't make progress, is that's the reward for us. So.
I guess the one thing I'll add about not messing up research, the way to ensure that you don't do that is to properly label tubes and put things back where you found them.
Yes.
Yeah,
you have to be a good lab citizen.
yeah. I have a story I can tell you later about that. But,
and try to understand what you're doing.
Yeah.
That's really helpful. The more you understand what you're doing and why you're doing it, the less likely you're going to make some grievous errors.
Yes, absolutely. Ask lots of questions. Learn what you're doing.
So and I helped out with these summer internships a few times in terms of informally, like being there for the undergraduates to provide them. I mean, we showed them around the Bay Area, so I mean, there's undergrads from everywhere. Show them around the Bay Area to help them getting used to lab culture, but the only times we got complaints from labs were, you know, people were, like Mark was saying, if you were just like not labeling things correctly, you kind of disrupt other people that way. Or there was one student who just constantly second guessed his graduate student and would go behind her back and like ask other people in the lab if she was right and things like that. So like that type of thing is frowned upon in terms of asking too many questions if you're like obviously undercutting someone.
Yeah.
But other than those sort of toxic environments like that, I mean, if you're just really interested and you're feeling like, oh, I'm lost because I have so many questions, just, I mean, the graduate student professor, I mean, they're going to be busy, so you may struggle to find the time to sit down with them, but you can just find time here and there to ask them. Like, I rotated David Weiss College as a developmental biologist at Berkeley, but I never took developmental biology, but I learned a lot during that rotation, just talking to people in the lab, doing the work at the bench a little bit. And so, like, nowadays, I work with a lot of developmental biologists, and I benefit from that just from, 10 weeks in a lab where I get to ask questions, work a little bit, get experience. And so, even those, like, short rotations or undergrad experiences where you just work in a lab really quickly, as long as you ask a lot of questions, that benefits you. It makes that person feel better, because if you're asking good questions, that means they're teaching you right? So it's a good thing to be enthusiastic.
Sorry, the one small thing that I'll add is a lot of research scientists up here, but is that one of the defining characteristics of a scientist is curiosity, and it's one of the most difficult things to train in the classroom, and it's something that I think overall our education system does very poorly, is fostering and encouraging curiosity, but that's what science is all about. And so showing that you have that is amazing and miraculous, because you can work with someone who's curious, but prodding someone to ask questions about, why does this PCR reaction work this way, and why, when I add this magnesium, why does it work better? Asking those types of, even those really fundamental, simple questions about the procedure and why the procedure works the way it does is fantastic.
I think sometimes people feel like, oh, this question's probably stupid, right? Why shouldn't we ask? But actually, a lot of those really simple questions that you think someone should have the answer for, often we don't have the answer for them, and you can really learn about like what the edges of our knowledge are just by asking the simple question. I mean, quite often, like, we get so advanced in our research questions that we forget like there's some really basic things that we just don't understand, and having that kind of like naive view of things can really lead you actually to ask some really important and deep questions. Why no such thing as a stupid question, and always the more you ask, show your curiosity. I think this is really, that's what we all love to see, people who are curious. And it can't be taught. You can learn curiosity by doing it, asking questions and then following up on those questions.
Just adding on to that, I guess there's another third personality in science, which is people who like don't necessarily admit that they're wrong. And so, I mean, there are certain people who will not understand what you're saying, but they just will nod and pretend like they do. I mean, there's just something, because those people are typically the ones who are smart in their class, they're not used to admitting that. And that's something we all struggle with a little bit. And so even if you don't understand something and you keep quiet and you just kind of nod along thinking, oh, maybe I can pick it up. A lot of time, like when I'm explaining my research, I can tell when someone just starts like blanking out or they don't understand. And so then I like have to back up and explain it again. And so if I'm explaining that to a student, that's actually kind of annoying that, you're not telling me when you don't get something. And so that curiosity just makes it a much easier thing to explain those concepts in lab. And so it's a very, I mean, there's a number of ways to look at it.
Yeah, I have a question about the area. It's called Biochemistry. So I'm thinking about to study that area. So what do you guys think of the biochemistry area and what's the future of that?
So I do bioinformatics. That's what my PhD is in.
Okay.
Like Mark was saying, my background is actually behavioral genetics. So I did bench work doing gassing flies for Alzheimer's research. And I got interested in bioinformatics doing my internship at Berkeley. So I was doing yeast genomics. And I had never done programming before or anything like that. And so bioinformatics is tough because you're either a biologist and the issue is the math and the programming is tough. Or you're a math programmer and the issue is the biology is kind of tough typically. And so those are the two big groups of people within bioinformatics. And so I mean, the future of bioinformatics, I mean, there's a lot of different things that are going to come off of it. Right now, I mean, graph theory is a really big thing. So if you're still taking classes and you're wondering what classes you want to take, I would say, I mean, some people say take programming classes. I don't think, I mean, I tried to take programming classes in undergrad and I just thought they were really boring. And I think that programming is the type of thing that you probably won't learn until you have a project you care about. And so that you can put off, but the biology, you have to learn biology, which means genetics. And genetics is something that, you know, especially if you understand genetics, genomics well, that will guarantee you right now with the onset of genetic medicine in a few years, at least a genetic counselor position in terms of working. But so wanting to do bioinformatics, you also going to need math and statistics as well. And so really getting into probability and math. And so I would say, you know, you have the first two calculus classes, then multivariable calculus with matrix algebra and all of that is another important field. And graph theory is another important field within math, which is really coming up within bioinformatics today because of all of what you can do with deploying graphs, cactus graphs, things like that, in terms of comparing genome sequences. So those, I'm not sure exactly where your question was going in terms of what classes you should take or what.
Because are you asking whether bioinformatics
What job in the future you can find and
So there's always, so bioinformatics, everyone needs, yeah, it's exploding.
It's probably the fastest.
It's the biggest, yeah, it's the biggest one, but it's also,
it's permeating every part of what we do in biology.
yeah.
So that's a good area.
And you know, genomics is definitely one of the things that's been most tied to bioinformatics, but computer modeling can be used in almost any field of biology. People who study proteins a lot use computers to model how they fold and how chemical reactions happen.
There's a lot of neural modeling with
neural nets and modeling nervous systems is another big thing. That, of course, there's the big Barack Obama's big brain initiative. And a lot of that,
Point is very good.
We can leave that.
But yeah, and I think what we're being said about the real challenge of bioinformatics is exactly what I'm saying, which is that there are people who are biologists that don't know much about computers, and people who know a lot about computers who don't know much biology. And if you can be the person who understands both sides of that, you're a very rare and valuable person.
Yeah. You can actually talk to both those groups.
Yeah, it can just really, it is still, even in my experience, like very hard to talk to people who can work with the computers, because I'm more of a biologist person.
Right.
And it's just, there's still a struggle in the field to really have people who are at the interface.
Right.
So that's something to think about in terms of
It's a lot of skills to have at
It's a lot of skills to have at once.
Yeah.
And you can pick them up, you don't have to pick them up all at once, but it's important to have both ultimately, I think.
Yeah. So I mean, I pretty much, from the start of graduate school, was trying to aim to be in that middle ground, which I think I hit, because I get a lot of job offers. So and so, and even then, it's like, yeah, the databases I made, people are always, I mean, the thing is, it's like, yeah, the people who work at JGI, they would make databases of genes, but they wouldn't give them names, it would just be random numbers. And I'm like, oh, people want names, and they're like, why? And so I give them names that people really like. But I mean, it's such a simple thing, but it, you know, it's two different groups of people who have different training and what different sets of things they think about. And so when a biologist, you know, they're like, oh, this gene is named wrong, just fix it in the database. I'm like, well, this database is shared with millions of people. I can't just change millions of people's computers at once. Like, it's like I can only do this once every few months in a coordinated fashion. And so even then, the biologists have trouble necessarily understanding database management and what it means to like have this international thing that we're trying to put together.
I think Adam's original advice about learning biology is good, because in the end, all the computer methods are tools, and tools evolve and tools change. So if you learn how to use the current generation of bioinformatics tools, 5 years from now, that could be useless. But if you understand how genetics work and how genomes are arranged, that's going to be useful no matter how the tools change. So I think that focusing more on the background biology while keeping yourself open to learning, continuously learning new tools for working with that is the good way to approach that.
But then on the other side, still the math and stats.
Yeah.
Those are
also
fundamental skills.
Well, those are also fundamental. That's also, I would say, fundamental knowledge. It's not like a programming language, but understanding the kind of basics of probability. That's not going to change. So that you should know.
So is there any like a business demand that as a company need like a bioinformatic calculation or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, well, the thing is, like, so one of the offers I was looking at was at Stanford. There were 2 labs. I mean, pretty much every lab kind of wants one in-house now, but certain labs may share it. I'm sorry.
All companies are trying to mine. There's a lot of publicly available data. All companies are trying to figure out how to mine that data. It's like hugely huge.
I mean, Google is trying to hire one.
Yeah, exactly. Google's running a whole initiative on
Yeah, to do genome biology. And so private companies. I mean, I work for the Department of Energy, so they're trying to go out. I mean, pretty much anyone who has anything to do with biology, genomics is a big thing right now.
But having some knowledge of biology will differentiate you from the masses of people who know how to work computers.
Exactly.
I have a question for the 2 clinician ladies. Do you ever find your environment slightly depressing at times? And I have a follow-up question. How hard would you say it is to find a PA or physician to shadow in the environment?
Yeah, I mean, I can, how, by depressing, you just mean being around.
Do you ever just, like, maybe geriatric care or something like
Well,
that?
yeah, so as an LVN, geriatric care is where LVNs are put right now, particularly in California. So like an assisted living, long-term care is where all of my clinical experience was, and not at all where I thought I would be interested in being. But actually getting in there, I really, really enjoyed it and found it far less depressing, which maybe sounds bad, but far less depressing than I was expecting. I was really worried about that. I thought that, I'm going to be surrounded by all these terminally ill, incapacitated, which I was. Almost everyone I took care of in long-term care is either paraplegic, trach, has no brain function left to communicate with. And that I actually found really, really interesting. And you find ways to kind of connect with the patients, which is why I love to go into nursing, is to connect with people. Even when that kind of traditional connection pathway, speaking, looking each other in the eye, knowing that another person's there, that is interestingly not as important to making that connection as I had thought. So yes, there are days that it is wholly depressing, and you go home and you're driving home or on the park or whatever, and you're feeling pretty low, but then there's the bigger picture of, I mean, for me at least, it's really important to kind of keep that broader picture. It's not every patient is just this sick, crippled person. They're humans who I get to, which maybe sounds.
So it's really interesting that you were surprised by that. So I think that underlines how important it is actually to go out and experience, get experience working in those, because we don't really know how you're going to react, I think.
I was absolutely dreading just the thought of working in a long-term geriatric care, which I just didn't think that was. I've always worked with children my whole life. I was a swim coach and a teacher for a while, and never thought that I would be able to connect with that group of people. But I found it very rewarding.
Yeah. So for me, actually, when I was rotating in geriatrics, my
kind of gave it